Good afternoon, everyone. This is Barbara Bishop from West Georgia, RESA. Hope all of you had a great school day today, and we are pleased that you have joined us for this webinar, whether you are listening live or whether you are listening to a recorded version at a later date. I'd like to check audio. Would you please raise your hand if you can hear me? Okay, great. Thank you so much. Welcome to our second in a series of Three for the Road webinars. These Three for the Road webinars are designed to provide a lot of information in a very short time period. So one thing is quite certain, and that is that we will run out of time. We will have just enough time perhaps to wet your whistle and to show you a little bit of what we have to offer by way of resources, but the real work will happen after the webinar when you and your colleagues discuss what you have heard and calibrate your own understanding as a school. So there is an optional reflection document that you could use if you'd like to take notes, and all of the images and handouts and session details, PowerPoint, etc. are housed or will be housed at tinyurl.com/3fordifferentiation. That's the link at the bottom of your screen. It will take a few hours for the video to render, but later this evening that website should have all of the content. So let's get started. This is one of my favorite differentiation pictures because it's a great reminder that, as Rick Wormelli said, kids can hit any target that sits still for them. So having really great, clear learning targets that are appropriate for all students for where they are in regard to the standards, that's a great way to begin with differentiation. So we do have a very significant purpose here, and that is to share resources for your school teams as you seek to develop a common definition of differentiation and its look-fors in order to improve student achievement, of course, but also to improve teacher performance on the TEKS. Here are our essential questions. What are the look-fors then of a differentiated classroom? How might we utilize these resources as we organize ongoing professional learning for differentiation from this point forward? So our agenda is as follows. We're going to have a brief introduction with a common definition of differentiation. I want to discuss with you a few of the beliefs that go hand in hand with differentiation and a few of the key ideas. And then we are going to take a quick look at 3 different strategies for differentiation, and then we'll talk a bit about suggested next steps for you to learn individually as well as collectively with your school teams. So here are some of the beliefs that go hand in hand with differentiation. First, differentiation is research-based and improves student performance, and we do in fact have a strong research base for differentiation, that it does improve student achievement. Secondly, that differentiation is not out of keeping with fairness. In fact, a belief of differentiation is that real fairness would be to give students what they need rather than identical experiences across the board. The end goal of instruction in a differentiated classroom is maximize progress rather than attempting to sort or rank students. Therefore, it does take a growth mindset that all can learn. And a final belief that we've listed here, to change the level of differentiation in a classroom or to increase the effectiveness of your purposeful planning, as some folks call differentiation, that does impact and positively affect all other realms of teaching and learning. So therefore, as you strive to increase the level of differentiation in your own classroom and in your own school, you will recognize that those changes lead to other changes. Perhaps how you might want to keep your records, or how you might want to communicate to parents or to one another. So here's a working definition, and I meant to say this at the start, but I can go ahead and say now. One of the links that you'll find on the website is a full list of the primary source documents that we used, the research, as well as the latest books from Tomlinson and other differentiation gurus. So this definition comes from culling a number of those resources. So differentiation then, a teaching philosophy, a belief system, an approach, wherein the teacher does the following. First, he or she anticipates that students are different and that they will come to the classroom with different needs, different backgrounds, different profiles, different preferences, different skill levels, and that because of that, the teacher will know and measure those differences. In order to honor those differences, to design experiences that individual students or like groups need. And here's the part that I think is really important. Doing so in spite and despite the fact that we have inherited a very strong notion that school is a place where students are given identical content, identical work, identical assessments. It's how we were taught many, many years. It reminds me of a Hebrew proverb: do not confine your children to your own learning, for they were born in another time. And I know we could have a lot of great discussions, as we did at the tech conference, about how students are really different kinds of learners than we might have been in the past. So it does require some things of the teacher. Differentiation requires the teacher to be more attuned. You have to be more observant. You have to listen more carefully. You have to be more flexible, because differentiated instruction requires you to respond to immediate needs as well as foreseen needs. You'll have to be more resourceful. Sorry, I'm out of step here. More transparent as well. And that's a good thing, because then the learning targets are very clear for students. More intentional. That's that purposeful planning that we spoke of earlier. And it does require a teacher to be more tolerant of multiple enterprises. So, a vital component of differentiation, and I like to remember this, that instruction and assessment are inseparable, that they go hand in hand. And it is vital in a differentiated classroom that assessment be ongoing, that it be accurate, and that there be constant checks for understanding. These do not have to be formal. They could be observational, they could be anecdotal, tickets out the door, they could be telling questions on a whiteboard or with technology, but keeping track of where students are at all times is the key to a differentiated classroom. It requires effective teacher feedback and commentary so that the progress can continue to move, and that so students will always know a given direction that they should head in order to make improvements on their work. And it does require purposeful planning informed by unique conditions. Your classroom is a unique place, and it was unique on Monday and will be differently unique on Tuesday, and keeping up with the differences and the changes is part of the art of differentiation. It's more like surfing and less like marching. A documentation of progress towards standard mastery. So those are some of the vital components, and here's a fun quote: consider everything an assessment. Differentiation is classroom practice that looks eyeball to eyeball with reality that kids are different. And differences do happen. They happen every day, all the time. We already know that. So the question is not, are they different, but what are we doing about that difference? The question is, are we addressing the difference, or are we ignoring the difference? Here's a nice analogy for us. Differentiated classroom is a jazz ensemble, not a marching band, and the teacher plays along. I warned you we're going to go at a pretty fast clip here, so I apologize if this is a lot to digest. Our hopes is that you will revisit the content and take just the parts of it that you and your school teams want to focus on, and have that kind of rich dialogue about it. There's also a belief that differentiation is part of a standards-based classroom. It is an essential part, and therefore it goes hand in hand with RTI. Okay, some of the misconceptions about differentiation. And I like having this list all together because it, I think, gives a good indication of some of what we might have worried about with differentiation, or maybe have heard. But differentiation is not when we leave kids complete control, or where we just simply give some kids more work and some kids less, or we let kids constantly choose what they want to do and therefore avoid anything that they might find difficult. It is not a reserving of high-quality resources just for the high performers. It's not getting the gifted kids to teach the other kids. It's not abandoning full group teacher-led instruction, because that still has a vital place in the instructional design. And it's definitely not a complete, every morning, coming up with a new lesson for every kid each day. Ain't nobody got time for that, right? So it is, however, the what and the why. So to achieve differentiation, the teachers are strategically going to change 4 things because of 4 things. And I'll stop for just a moment so you can gather those 4 things and 4 things into your head. And it is the what and the why. And here are the 4 things that are changed: content, process, product, or learning environments. We have additional resources to delve deeper into each of these options for differentiated change, and you can find those on the website. An important distinction, however, that I think we should go ahead and say is that it is not an altering of standard. Strategically altering the content does not mean changing the standard. It means changing the level of expectation and required experience and thinking involved in assigned work and the assessments that go with it. It is to accelerate or compact, to add more complex considerations, to add more depth to exploration, or on the flip side, to scaffold for those things so that students who are struggling can work their way toward that kind of complex consideration. A special note about curriculum compacting. It is a rule that we do not want to have students who are being accelerated do all work, their accelerated work and regular classroom work. Instead, it's just an alternative. So why are we making these changes? Because kids are different with readiness, with interest, with learning preference, and with learning goal. And we can assess the readiness and the interest and the learning profiles and the goals so that we can actually have all the data that we need in order to make decisions about changing those 4 things: the content, the process, the product, and the learning environment. So in a sense, there are all these different ways that you can differentiate. You can differentiate the learning environment because of the learning preference. You can change content because of readiness. You can change the product because of the interest, and so on and so on. So how does this relate to TEKS? Well, as we know, standard number 4 for teacher performance, number 4 differentiation, says that a proficient teacher in regards to differentiation will consistently challenge and support each student's learning, whereas the exemplary teacher will do the consistent as well as continual, and also serve as a leader in his or her school in that regard. And one thing that's important to note is that on the TEKS rubric, there is a direct mention of content, as well in the exemplary descriptor of needs and interests. So therefore, the 3 example strategies that I would like to share resources for today are similar in that they're all addressing a change in content. And one thing that I have found in working with differentiated ideas is that sometimes we can get hung up on whether or not is that a process change or a product change, or is that a content and a process change? I don't think we necessarily always have to label our differentiation choices one over the other. Sometimes when you change a product, in order to produce a new product, you're going to have to change your process as well. So sometimes they do go hand in hand. But we'll take a look at differentiation by tiered assignments, because that is the biggie. That's the one way of differentiation that really targets a change of content due to readiness. And then we'll also take a look at differentiation by frame of reference or perspective, and differentiation of customized vocabulary. Strategy 1, tiered instruction. So tiered instruction is like a wedding cake. It's all one flavor, same color icing, but it's multi-layered. It doesn't necessarily mean that one kid's going to get a huge hunk of cake and the other one get a small piece. Everyone could have the same size piece, but it just might be from a different layer. The intention of tiered instruction is to set students up for a challenging success. It's that time when the teacher thinks, what can I have them do that they will succeed at? However, it still has to have a challenge. And the assumption is that from that tiered assignment, there will be success, and that the success will generate some more motivation to proceed with the learning. Because human beings do want to be competent at things, and we do get joy from success. So, differentiating content by readiness in this particular way. There's a framework for tiered assignments, or rather a little to-do list, and it starts with identifying the outcomes. We have to be very clear about what the essential questions are and what it is that we want students to know, understand, and do. It's important then also to provide an initial instruction activating strategy, which I think can work very well in a full group. But we don't want to skip that because there are many learners who have content readiness and understanding, but it's not at the tip of the tongue, it's not at the top of the brain, and so activating that strategy can give everyone a chance to recognize what they do in fact know. Then you assess for readiness. It could be some formal looking pretest. It could be some formative assessment that is much more informal than that. It could even be a challenge by choice, where you tell students, look, this one is more complex than others, and why do you think it's more complex? Let's take a look at it, etc. And then you design small group tiered assignments. The rule of thumb is that 3 works pretty well. A basic one for remembering and understanding and getting at the core of content with a performance activity. Another that is more proficient with application and analysis of a performance activity, and then another one that is more advanced. And I think it's important to note here that we would not always want to teach with tiered assignments. For one reason, if we did it all the time this way, some of the same students might repeatedly have experience at the upper levels of bloom, while others might not ever have an opportunity to work at that level of bloom. So this is just one way, one time. A way to think of it is to consider the concept that is to be understood or the skill to be mastered, and then to start with the proficient on task level first, adjust that task then up or down for complexity. We're looking for that perfect zone where it's not so difficult as to cause frustration and loss of confidence, but it's also not so easy that it becomes boring, or that you find, or the student finds him or herself resentful of the task. So who do you think of when you are tiering your instruction? Well, of course, as the school year goes on and as you get more and more attuned to your students, this will come automatically as you will think about individual kids, but as a rule, you're planning the options for students who demonstrate in that assessment that they could work well in the mainstream content, the other kids who exhibited during that pre-assessment a significant knowledge base and need for another aspect, and those who need additional supports due to lapses in knowledge. What I'd like to point out here as most important is the part where it says who demonstrated in assessment. We don't want to fall into the trap of always thinking that Bernard is in the Bluebird group and that Henry is in the Buzzard group. This is a difficulty in the classroom for obvious reasons, and for school climate. We want these groups to be data-driven, but also to be flexible. These are not static groups. There are ways to move in and out of them as you demonstrate that you are ready for different work. There are maybe other students who have 504 plans, even student described goals or parent described goals or IEPs. There may be other students who need an additional tier. So sometimes you may be designing for 4 tiers, but not always. Sometimes those students fall into one of those 3 tiers as well. So what in the world are the options? You can change the materials, change the form of expression, the level of complexity, the amount of structure, the number of steps, the level of dependence, and the time provided. And you don't just have to tier an activity that is done in front of you. You can tier all kinds of assignments, activities. Homework is a great place to play around with tiered assignments, experiments, materials, even the assessments, and the writing prompts, all tiered. So those are many options for us in terms of what we can change. And here are some guidance. The things that would be common among the different activities would be that they have the same concept or skill, that there was a time when the whole class was together, and I think it's great when there's a time at the end for every group to see what the other group had been working on and to validate that all work was important and that the full group benefits from having heard what the others have done and not just what the gifted or advanced learners have done. All tiers should be respectful and engaging the work itself, and of course we talked about what can be changed. Here's a little example. These were called tasks 1, 2, and 3, and then I remembered that I had seen in a classroom a teacher who was very good at differentiation who would give her tasks names according to what they were. So it didn't have a stigma of 1, 2, 3, or orange always means great, blue means trouble. It's just this was the task called what about you, this was the task called one day, and then this is the task called now and then. And you can see the different content that is being manipulated and the different thinking that would go on with these different assignments, yet all targeting the same standard. Here's another one, a task called Who is Here, where you're simply just counting and showing how many. A task called Roll Call, where you are also considering who might be absent, and then one where you have more of an additional step of considering the set of boys and the set of girls. This is one of my favorite charts. I've shown it to many people, so if you've seen it before after having spent some time with me, then you can attest to the fact that I really do love it. It's called The Equalizer. It comes from Tomlinson, and it's just a nice visual of what in the world can you change when you're wanting to change the tiers. You can make assignments that are more foundational or more transformational. You can make assignments that are more concrete or more abstract, that have multiple facets or single facets, that require great independence or little independence. And here's another example. This particular example is a math example, and what I like about this chart is that it includes this third column wherein the teacher would describe the part of the equalizer chart that had been changed, just to show greater intentionality. There is a link on the web page to a tiered activity planner with a really great step-by-step description from ASCD, and so I'll leave that link to you. And now we're going to have to jump right fast to strategy number 2. This is the strategy called frames of reference, and the idea of this frame of reference will come really easily to those of you who have already implemented thinking maps, but even without an implementation or a use of thinking maps in a school or a classroom, this idea of a frame of reference as a differentiation tool applies in multiple circumstances at multiple grade levels and different subjects. I thought it might be useful for us to sort of revisit the definition for frame of reference, the structure, the concepts, the values, the customs, the views by which an individual or a group would perceive or evaluate data. It's your perspective. It's the lens through which you look at things. It's how you think about things, how you consider things. And changing or adding a frame of reference is an easy way to alter the content, sometimes to make it more complex and have an additional step, other times to make it less complex and more direct. And it provides a means for differentiation without the need for extensive teacher planning.